Today we're going to be talking about fractions on a number line. Please have your math book ready and a pencil. First of all, how do we find fractions when we're talking about a number line? In front of you, you have a number line. It might look very similar to the timeline that we made for the Wax Museum. And you're right, timelines are a type of number line. When we're looking at a number line, the first thing we need to do is we need to label the numerator. When we label the numerator, what we're going to be doing is we're going to start at 0 and we're just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are a total of 6 equal parts on the number line in front of you. As you can see, I've labeled my numerators. The next thing that we need to do is find the denominator. Remember, denominators are how many total equal parts you've split the whole into. If I were to imagine this as one whole from 0 to 1, I've split it equally into 6 total parts. Knowing that, then my denominator becomes 6 all the way across the board. So 1 6, 2 6, 3 6, 4 6, 5 6, and 6 6. Now that we've found both the numerator and the denominator, we've found fractions on a number line. So let's practice. In front of you, you can see a number line, and I've placed a point on the number line and I've labeled it Z. I would like you to tell me what fraction Z is at. First, let's find our numerators. Remember, when I'm finding a numerator, I start at my 0 and I count up. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Next, I need to find my denominator. When I'm looking at my denominator, I'm asking myself, how many equal parts did I split my whole into? Because I counted up to 4 when I was counting numerators, I know that my denominator is 4. This number line splits into 4 equal parts. So 4 becomes my denominator across the board. Now that I've found my numerator and denominator, I can clearly see that Z is located at the fraction 1/4. Let's practice again. In front of you is a number line with a point labeled H. I want to know what fraction H is at. Let's first find my numerator. Starting at my 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to make my fractions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now I need to create my denominator. My denominator is how many equal parts I have split my whole into. Because my numerator ends at 7, I know that this has been split into 7 equal parts, and therefore that becomes my denominator across the board. 7, 7, 7, and all the way across. Notice when I get to one whole, I have a whole number and I have my fraction. 7/7 is the same thing. It is equal. to 1 whole. Now, what fraction is point h at? I can see that h is at 3/7. I want to practice one more time, but let's be careful. I'm being a bit tricky here. If you're looking at the number line, I hope you notice that this number line is just a tad bit different. This time, I have 1 whole and I have 2 wholes. Oh, things are getting a little more difficult. Let's first find my numerator. Starting at 0, let's go up to 1 whole. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I know that from 0 to 1, I have split my whole into 5 equal parts. Because I know that 5 becomes my denominator all the way across the board. Even though I can keep counting, once I've hit my whole number, my 1 whole, 5/5, my denominator still stays at 5, even when I go into 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. So even as I'm counting, because 0 to 1 is 5, it's been split into 5 equal parts, my denominator stays the same. Let's keep counting our numerators. I've ended at 5/5. After 5/5 comes 6/5, 7/5, 8/5, 9/5, and 10/5. You might be thinking, Mrs. Holly, you've just created some improper fractions. And you're absolutely right. Once I get past my whole number here, all of my fractions become improper because I have more unit fractions than I do denominators. So I could say that 6/5 is also 1 and 1/5, 1 and 2/5, 1 and 3/5, 1 and 4/5, and then my 1 and 5/5 becomes 2 wholes. So my answer when answering the question, well, where is point B? I could say 6/5, which is equal to 1 and 1/5. We've talked about in the past how we don't like to leave our answer as an improper fraction. So the best way to answer where point B is at would be 1 and 1/5. Take a moment and take out your math book. Turn to page 335. Pause this video until your book is open and you're ready to go. Now that you have page 335 open, let's look at the second section of this page. Follow along as I read. It says, these number lines are divided to show different fractions. Let's take a moment to consider the 3 number lines below. I notice as I look on the top of each of the number lines, I see all of my unit fractions, even when they become improper. I've got 0 halves, 1/2, 2/2, 3/2, 4/2, 5/2, and so on. On the other side, or the bottom side of the number line, it looks like I'm counting by mixed numbers. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and so on and so forth. You can see that on all of the number lines below. On the top, I have my improper fractions, counting all the way up by my unit fractions, even if it makes an improper fraction. On the bottom, I have my fractions that are split into mixed numbers. Now that we've noticed that, let's take a closer look at that first point on our number line. It's on the top number line, and it's all the way at the very right-hand side, A. If I were to look at point A, I could give you an improper fraction and a mixed number. Pause the video and see if you can write both the improper fraction above the number line and the mixed number below the number line. Now that you've written both the improper fraction and the mixed number, let's see how you did. On top of the number line, if I was counting 6 halves, 7 halves, 8 halves, my next improper fraction would be 9 halves. Give yourself a star if you got that. When I'm talking about my mixed numbers, if I'm starting at 3, I would say 3, 3.5, 4. My next mixed number is 4 and 1/2. Give yourself a star if you figured that out as well. So I could say that point A is both at 9 halves or 4 and 1/2. Let's look at the next number line and look at point B. Once again, pause the video and see if you can identify the improper fraction and the mixed number of point B. Now that you've identified the improper fraction and mixed number, let's see how you did. Let's look at the improper fractions first. Starting at 0/4, I'm going to go 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. I've just hit my whole, but I'm going to make an improper fraction and do one more fourth, which would be 5/4. Now, looking below, I'm going to start at 0, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1. Now that I've hit one whole, I'm going to count again with my mixed number to get 1 and 1/4. Let's look below at the very last number line. I can see that they're counting by eighths. I know that because I've noticed that my denominator is 8 across the board. But notice they didn't count by all of the eighths. They just counted by some of them. It looks to me like they're counting by fourths all the way up. So I have 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on and so forth. Let's look at point E. They haven't given us all of the 1/8, but I'm sure we can find it together. Count with me. 0/8, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. E is at 3/8. Let's keep counting and see if we can find where F is. 4/8, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 7/8. Let's continue on and see if we can identify where G is on our number line. I'm going to skip ahead all the way up to 2, and let's start counting by eighths. So you can see at the top I have 16/8, so we're going to count with our improper numbers, our improper fractions first. So 16/8, 17/8, 18/8, 19/8, 20/8, 21/8, 22/8, 23/8. So 23/8. Now let's count by mixed numbers. 2, 2 and 1/8, 2 and 2/8, 2 and 3/8, 2 and 4/8, 2 and 5/8, 2 and 6/8, 2 and 7/8, 2 and 7/8. Follow along with me as I read the next directions. It says, write greater than or less than to make the statement true. I think if we look at the number lines above, it could help us as we're writing greater than or less than. Let's see. It says 3/4 is blank 5 halves. 3/4 and 5 halves. I notice that my first number line counts by twos. Let's find where 5 halves is. As I'm counting, I can see that here. My next number line is counting by fourths. Let's find where 3/4 is. I'm going to do a little erasing here. Now that I've erased, I can see that 3/4 is less than 1 whole. Comparing my fraction 3/4 with 5 halves, I can clearly tell using my number line that 5 halves is bigger. In fact, it's 2 wholes and 1 half. So I'm going to write less than. 3/4 is less than 5 halves. Let's look again at number 2. Number 2 is comparing 15/4 with 20/8. 15/4 with 20/8. Take a moment and find 15/4 on your second number line here and 20/8 on the third number line here. Pause the video until you've found these two numbers. Now that you've identified these two numbers, hopefully you found 15/4 here and 20/8 here. Once you've found these fractions on the number line, it is easy to see that 15/4 is greater than 20/8. Finish numbers 3 and 4 by yourself. Then, play the video and see how you did. Now that you've found the answer to 3 and 4, let's see how you did. 10/4 is located here, and 24/8 is here. It looks like 24/8 is bigger than 10/4, so I would complete my statement by saying 10/4 is less than 24/8. For number 4, you should have identified 2 and 4/8 here, and 1 and 3/4 here. Once I've found those, I can see that 2 and 4/8 is greater than 1 and 3/4. Let's turn the page and keep working. Turn in your books one page over to 336. Let's look at the directions for the top part. It says, tell how many equal parts are between 0 and 1. Then write the fraction labels above the equal parts. Let's get close here. Starting at 0, let's do our numerators first, just like we practiced. 1, 2, 3. I've reached 1 whole, so now I know that there are 3 equal parts in 1 whole. That would tell me that my denominator is 3. We've identified that point A is at 1/3. Let's move on to point B. Let's look and make our improper fractions first. So 3/3, 4/3, 5/3, 6/3. Now let's make our mixed numbers. I've already hit my 1 whole, so I'm going to go 1 and 1/3, 1 and 2/3, and then 1 and 3/3 3 can go into 3 one whole time, so 1 3/3 is actually 2. Now I can tell that point B is at 5/3 or 1 2/3. See if you can find where C is located. Tell me the improper fraction and the mixed number. Once you've done that, play the video and see how you did. Hopefully you discovered that point C is at 10/3 or 3 1/3. Before we finish our lesson today, I'd like us to do the last section on page 336. It tells us to mark and label the letters of each fraction or mixed number on the number line. Now, instead of creating the mixed number or improper fraction, you're going to be placing a point on your number line. Let's look at A. A is asking me to place a point at 1/5. I know that I haven't reached one whole yet because I don't see any whole numbers here. But it looks like my number line has been split into lots of different numbers. Let's consider those first. If I count each one of these small little tick lines, I wonder how many equal parts I'll find. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10/10 could be a whole. But 1/5 can't be found in 10/10. Let's see if I skip a line. So we're going to go a little bit closer. Do you see how this little tick mark is a little bit bigger? Let's count by those bigger tick marks now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've split my number line into 5 equal parts, 5/5. Both 10/10 and 5/5 are one whole. Now I've split it into fifths, so I can successfully put A on my number line. If I'm looking for 1/5, I need to follow my blue fifths. 1/5 is located here. I'm going to place a point there and put the letter A. Now let's look at B. It says 7/10. Well, hey, we already split our number line into tenths using our green marker. So I can pretty easily go through and find where 7/10 is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. 7/10 is located here. I'm going to place a dot or point there and label it B. C is asking for 1 2/5. When I have this whole number 1 here, that means that I'm going to be past my 1 whole. So I have to be past 1. Let's split up the numbers 1 and 2 into tenths and fifths like we did between 0 and 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Using my blue, I'm going to skip every other one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Have you guys noticed that 5 and 10 are multiples? 5 goes into 10. In fact, 5 times 2 is 10, which is why we're able to split our tenths every 2. Let's go back to our problem. It says I'm looking for 1 2/5. I know that my blue represents my numerator 5. So after I've passed 1, I'm going to count by fifths. 1 1/5, 1 2/5. Oh no, D says 2 1/2. We haven't split our number line into halves. But could we? Let's go back to 0 and 1. If I'm counting up by tens and fives, what's in the middle of 10 tenths? What would be half of 10? Well, I know that 5 is half of 10, so let's count 5 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That splits it into half. So 5 tenths and 5 tenths. This is my half point. Now that I know that, every 1/5 or every 5 tenths, let's go up and see if we can find 2 and 1/2. First, I'm going to find my whole number 2. Then I'm going to count by tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know that 5 tenths is 1/2. So let's count up to 5 tenths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that is 1/2. 2 and 1/2 is there. See if you can find where points E, F, G, and H are. Pause this video until you found your answer and then see how you did. Now that you found your answers for E, F, G, and H, let's see how you did. 3 and 3 tenths. I counted by the tenths, which is my smallest unit, and I found E 3 tenths away from my whole number 3. F should be at 4 and 2/5. I know that my fifths is every other mark. So I noted that in my blue marker, and I found 2/5 right here. 4 and 2/5. Then G was asking me to find 4 and 9 tenths. Tenths is my smallest unit of measurement, so I used my green marker to count 9 times past 4, my whole number. And finally, my last one was H, 5 and 1/2. 5 tenths is half or halfway in between 5 and 6. So I found my H after counting 5 tenths from my 5 whole number. This is tricky stuff, and I know it's confusing. You guys have done an awesome job sticking with me today in our lesson. Because you've done such an awesome job persevering, I'm not going to have you do any homework tonight. You only needed to watch this video. That's all I'm expecting of you. Tomorrow, I'll help you start the homework so that you feel more confident. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy your night of no homework.